The last intermezzo, opus 117 by Brahms, always leaves me deeply wondering, what did he want to say through these empty octaves? He who always harmonized everything with sixths, like his D minor concerto opening. These sixths are minor or major, they're the mood setting, they're the coating of the harmonization. But these melodic ones, tripled and empty. There is nothing more empty than an octave while dubbing the unison. At the same time, it dubs that emptiness of the unison. It's a strange thing to say because it would normally mean more enforced if you dub or triple. But in fact, he could have written it in an orchestral way. He might have double basses and then violins and then in between, and have. And then there is the fact of the motion. It's all step motion. Rising very, very, very slowly to the higher note by step. There's something of a Sisyphus legend, rising and dropping, and before reaching, dropping, and step by step, relentlessly, almost expressively reaching that high note, as if each step is a difficult rise. And then drop. And again. I think deeply that there is some kind of linear step-by-step struggle, emotionally, psychologically, symbolically, that reaches little by little, little by little, the next step. And the next step is an achievement, even if it's not a leap, it's not an express emotional leap. In the middle section of this, and there is always a B section, almost. I like to think that sometimes composers write their B section first and coat it with A sections around. Who knows in which order they composed? Perhaps some do. It's not only the other section. Well, it obviously is something else musically section. That's what a composition teacher would say, something contrasting, something, if it's heavy, then lighter hearted, or if it's the opposite. And factually, all these A section patterns of 2/16 notes are all on the beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. There isn't a note that doesn't play on the downbeat of each beat. Basically, every beat is a downbeat. So you feel grounded. There is no uplifting. You feel like you're stepping, this idea of the steps of that scale, rising step by step. That's true, but at the same time, the B section is the one that uses the step motion, but with the contrasting leaps. The same thing, but in a obviously faster pattern of the 16th notes flowing motion. That is true. Anybody can notice this. I don't have to tell it. But what strikes me when I try to understand the point of the opening section that I told you in the beginning of our meeting, it's always puzzling me. What does he want to say? Here he has in the melody in the middle section, he has nines rather than steps of seconds, which is exactly the big leap of the same. And so it appears like contrasting, he's doing big leaps. All over the keyboard so fast. But if you reduce it, the obsessive step motion of the octaves of the opening, which are mysterious to me because in a way that emptiness or harmonization makes them even more questioning my inner self, like what does he want to tell me? Or is there anything he wants to tell me? Perhaps I'm searching too much into the answer of what the gesture, the interval, the harmonization, lack of, the pedalization could be. But that couldn't work because of the passing tone. If he wanted this, he would have done arpeggios. So Beethoven does in the Appassionata. And then in the slow movement, Beethoven uses harmonization for the melodic line that is only step. We don't have he doesn't harmonize the melody because in a way it's a chant, in a way it's like a Gregorian chant. It's some kind of imploration. Of course, that's a bit far-fetched to think that, or to imagine, or to daydream, or to fantasize, whatever you want to say, that Brahms, in fact, wrote a Gregorian chant. Which by essence was monodic and then was still monodic even on the fifth, is the absence of contrapoint, the absence of harmonization, and absence really of rhythmization because everything is on the beat. I find it fascinating. And with age, I found it more and more difficult to find how to express it because it is in interpretation terms now, besides the analytical design of the patterns and of the texture and the choices of the registration, all the things that interrupt the silence and organize a soundscape that is so striking, even by its emptiness, harmonically speaking. But in interpretation ways now, just think as a pianist, not as a analyst or a composer, and think, what do I do? Do I bring these 16th notes by 2 to rise to the note, or to drop, or to ornament around? And then, like bowed instrument, ta-da-dum, ta-da-dim, do I use those 16th notes as a discrete crescendo, perhaps just a little bit of accelerando, perhaps almost none, perhaps a nano rubatissimo or rubatino, and if I do so, the 16th notes being tightly a little bit proportionally shorter than the 8th notes in ratio, then I insist longer on the arrival note of this step by step. But then in a way, I start in interpretational makeup over expressing this idea of the step by step rising, which he wrote without any rubato indication. Therefore, the 16th notes in the slow tempo by 2 should be equally calm than the 8th note, which decays of the arrival points. I imagine practicing it in order to find the right color, pace, interpretational truth, if any, at least subjectively the one I am trying to share with you, I'm searching for, is to play them all even. Either as 8th notes, either as all 16th notes. The dilemma in an interpretational advice, choice, or personal choice, depending if you teach it or you teach it to yourself or to somebody else, is not to justify by saying, oh, I have a better analytical understanding, or I understand because this or that. You can always find arguments in one way or the other to prove your point. The point is your playing itself masking, overlapping the importance, or just underlining or letting the music itself express it? In a way, you're involved when you play the piano. You're not just a reader who is objective and just reading the text, and therefore I just play the notes. And the magic will happen because I just play them as written. I still think we need to find a subtle way to insert our own psyche of the response to the musical expression that we receive by reading the music, since the written is our only connection to the intent of the composer. And then out of this written element, we try to say, in response, this is how I feel it. So what are the choices for the interpretation? The tempo, so we can extend it according to the resonance of the instrument, the acoustic, or the length of sound that is allowed. Well, it's not allowed, it's possible. If you play with a bowed instrument in chamber music, this piece, then there are certain restrictions with how slow you can go. On the piano, if you want to go outside of any reasonable tempo choice, so to say reasonable, you could really go naturally. It's overstretched, overextended, and completely eccentric, almost as if zooming slow motion and making it lose its shape in terms of direction of the line, of the meaning of this, it's not even syllabic, it's vowel by vowel, so you lose the meaning of the words. You only listen to what I tell you now. Of course, you start hearing sounds more than meanings, because the meaning gets stretched to the point to which you don't get it. But the mystery of the individual sounds becomes more mysterious. If you play it in a more flowing tempo, at least you bring yourself to the next step, and to the following step, and finally to the dominant step. And then after this group of bars, you restart. So all of a sudden you realize by listening, as a discoverer that you are when you're the listener, let's say you don't know the piece and you hear it, you realize that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then it starts again. 1. So then all of a sudden, after the mysterious opening, you start intellectually shaping it, as if you zoom out and you start understanding, okay, that's the group of beats or steps or structure, construction, like architectural entity. And then you see, oh, I'm going to restart, and now I'm doing some adding of the fifth by Brahms. And so you realize the group of beats that create a phrase. It's exactly syllables that create words, who create together with other words a sentence, and that has a meaning. And then all of a sudden the meaning overwhelms the individual music of each sound, or of each letter, of each vowel, or of each syllable pronounced. I like that elemental opening that reads like, I don't know where I'm going. Am I knowing where am I? I could just continue imaginarily to sort of linger around in the same patterns of 2/16 note with patterns of step motion. In a relatively C-sharp minor descending melodic mode. I like that idea of this exercise, because the one that I did with equal notes, one with invented extra step notes, teaches me something about the material. I am using the opportunity not to play composer with him, of course not, but to enter the DNA of his thoughts, musical expression, intent, not knowing if I'm reaching anything by exploring these different aspects of this opening statement. Its texture, its symbolism, its musical stretched tempo or less stretched tempo. If the tempo is only the mood, then we can play it differently according to how we feel the moment we do. We don't feel the same at 7 a.m. as at 9 p.m. according to our personal biorhythm and how we are, and how we are when we play for people and how we play by ourselves. Now, you're here with me. For those of you who joined me, thank you. But I am alone, and you're alone, and we're together remotely. When you play a concert during the ephemeral moment of intense communion around the music, we are all together, the performer and the audience, and then therefore there is an emotion, excitement, you can call it adrenaline rise, you could call it anything that you feel you do in order to feel like now is the moment, and now we share it. So it's not just reading the text, it's not just telling the text, it's also conveying the text, and all of a sudden perhaps you will start playing more extrovertedly because they are there, the audience is there. So you send them each subphrase, each rise, each wave up, or imaginary wave. So is it possible to play in public with audience without to try to seduce the audience in a certain, even not pejorative way? Because obviously when you play by yourself, you don't seduce yourself, you only answer to the, well, you could, but you answer to what you receive from the score. You materialize it by sounds, and then phrasing, fingerings, articulation, pedaling, tempo, direction of the line. You start doing this sculpting, shaping. Is it tongued? Is it connected? Is it legato? Is it over legato? Is it just spoken? Are the syllables in each 16th note, are they just tied and slurred? Or is it? Like how you also could, on top of all these different ingredients I mentioned, choose to voice, like in an orchestration. Now he doesn't indicate any voicing. He perhaps, by not indicating, lets us play just plain and simple, and simple is not the word because simple means nothing except confusing us. But let's say empty of harmonization, empty of melodization. He tells us through his opening not to overstate it. But then again, when you do it in your practice room or by testing it on an empty stage without audience and then playing the performance, if you can, with the audience, I think that the perception of the sound quality, the perception of the projection of the sound, the perception of the tempo is not the same. I think perhaps the heartbeat goes faster because you want to share this emotion, because it's an emotional moment. So the intellect has to remain untouched from the emotional aspect of the coating of our human being. But we are both as humans. We're not just, well, some more than others can separate the two. But let's say that in general we are prone to coat, at least if not more, with our emotions, our intellect. And therefore, even if we know by the brain that we want to do this, perhaps we might end up doing. And if we do that, then we feel like intuitively, without even thinking, on the spot, making it up as it comes with the unexpected of the moment on stage, since it's one time through. Then we overcompensate because we started with a crescendo, perhaps we didn't intend. And then we rise more to compensate the preceding by explaining the following and rising before we drop. So objectively we might have not wanted to do any of this and just let the music rise in terms of the notes of Brahms, which we can intellectualize, at least I could, outside of the performance being. And when I perform, I might do. So what do I suggest to a student? Hold back or add to it, or let the music speak and just stay out of it? It's impossibly difficult, almost impossible rather than difficult, to find the right approach. It's easy to say intellectually, let the music speak. Fine, then we should open all the score and just look at it. We don't need anybody to recite it to us by playing it for us. But obviously the player, therefore the speaker of the music, the one who brings it for that moment that we chose to gather alive, away from just the notational skill of whatever the composer chose to notate it in. 2/4, 2/8, 4/4. We don't know. It's not a dictation we take. We listen and we let ourselves daydream, because all of a sudden these steps that are written and played, therefore, they talk differently to the psyche of the different members of the audience or to you individually. Some see in it perhaps struggle, before drop. And therefore in the B section, oops, sorry. In these leaps, unlike the opening section, all these leaps are just before the beat. 4/1, 4/2, 4/3, 4/4, the 4th, 16th note before each first, second, third, or fourth beat, and therefore some kind of breathlessness is suggested by this leap and by the fact that they are not on the beat. But so there's an impatience, inner agitation, emotional turmoil, excitement, hope, desperation, and those leaps are in fact the steps, as I mentioned earlier, but overstepping the octave. So they are leaps of steps. Cannot say that, it doesn't make any sense, but that's what came up on the spot in my mind to say. And they're not as stable because they come before the beat, but not half, but just quarter before the beat. The last 16th note, like Beethoven's Sonata in G. And here, of course, it's not written with the chords. And I find that this late Brahms composition represents a lot of what he always expresses through his life in terms of emotion, strength, and intensity and intellect. And here, because the piano is an instrument that, in a way, is self-sufficient, that's true, unlike many others that need several to play music together, it's also lonely, and that sense of loneliness, I think, is very clear in his suggestion of the opening. At the very coda, he harmonizes the arrival notes, not each note, as if to give us, I think, bit of a minor mood explanation of that statement, but the statement remains more striking than the mood. as if there are something almost like a code that is stalled inside here. It's not a melodic, beautiful melodic line for the, his fourth symphony. Of course, you understand it. You have the lips, the flow, the element, the melodic, the harmonic, all in the same. The melodic harmonized. How can you not respond to it? I mean, it's like a God-given gift that keeps on giving, like a perfume of emotional. Oh, you're there right away. Just you hear that. And here he chooses to not. It's almost as if it's spoken more than it's sung, is told more than it's played. As if each word or each syllable have some kind of meaning, like a pin code. Reminds me of Bach signing his name in German denomination of the keys, BACH. As if that was also some kind of signature. But even if it doesn't have a specific symbolism in terms of the specific letters and sounds, like in BACH, I find that it has some kind of the same, it's more of a questioning of ourselves than mood setting that, like its Fourth Symphony opening, just puts us right away in a flotation of some kind of daydream. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. Here is, what is it? And still that, and now? Okay, perhaps, okay, so we don't step much far away from the first step, because we're still here. And then he rises. And again, dropped this time. I find that a striking opening because it doesn't give an answer. It doesn't only set a mood. Of course, it does a certain way. But it's mostly as if he questions through his music us. Who are you? Who are you? What are you doing? Where are you going? What are you hoping? Would you like to go there and see this and meet that or these and those, and finally return to your home or your place and then try again? Explore like an initiation path. It's something philosophical in that statement, as if he's telling us, I'm emptying it of harmonization, therefore I don't give you all the clues of the tension release of the tonal system. I only state the bare truth or the bare question of us search of truth. I just realized that during this time that I am sharing these thoughts with you, I am only deepening in my own questioning of it. What does it mean? Perhaps the answer is in the question itself. As the philosopher says, the destination is not that the trip itself. So perhaps the question that I find Brahms rises is in itself the answer. There's no answer. But I do feel when I perform it that it gives a sense of some kind of a end of life statement. I've seen, I've been, I've experienced, and I come back to the basics, and well, that's all what it is, the bare bones of the truth. Probably and most likely because of my sentimental approach to things personally, and I know that this is a weakness compared to the intensity of the intellectual approach or the rational approach or the analytical approach only. Put together, in my case, the sentimental prevails, so I probably make the piece, when I share with you this way, tell me things that it didn't intend to be telling me, or perhaps Brahms left it purposely an open question, and that is why he emptied it from any harmonization, in order to make the statement deeply more reaching our own questioning in our souls, like it reaches the depth of our own existential question: why, when, where, how. And I must say that when you play the B section, of course it's the contrast, as I said earlier, which he does, regardless of the analytical aspect of things. And so how does he return to the A prime after the B section? I wondered. This time it's really agitation. This is the B prime of the B section. Favorite 6. Here he profusely gives us harmonization. So you feel like here it's an explanation perhaps of the emptiness of the end of life, wisdom, philosophy, statements, all this kind of mood that I try to convey to you today. I think the middle section is the tempestuous expression of what life is: vibrant, driven, hopeful, daring. The leaps are daring, high, and you're everywhere, and at the same time you're stretching thin, and you're hoping, and you're rising, and you're driving, and your mood driven by the emotion of the drive. It feels like in the middle of the reminiscence of what probably the essence of youth is, a continuous energy drive. So any composer who has to write an A prime after a contrasting B section, in this case, more driven than the A section, which is more idle, obviously, in this case, would go ritenuto or subito, back to the opening calm. And he chooses to do something that the first time I heard this piece, before I had looked at the score, that it's often one hears it before from somebody else playing, then one has heard it by looking at the music, but the music is striking. He says he's doubting, and he's expressing again. One step higher. And each hope has a little bit of a hint of disappointment. Didn't do the third one, I just made it up. He chose only to reproduce it twice. And as if reluctantly in an emotional translation that I would make of the transition back to the A prime. And that's what I like to convey in interpretation. Reluctantly, he has to leave the reminiscence of that vivacious and lively, obviously, B section. Regretfully, he has to leave it to return to the reality of that perhaps old age moment. And for the first time, he calls that harmonization that I told you he avoided doing in the opening section. By harmonizing on the top and on the bottom with the deep basses. He sandwiches the melody with the harmonization and the bass, and then he returns to the empty octaves of the statement of the opening. As if he's returning to this emptiness that is the essence, to the nucleus, to the essence, the single note. I find that return to the A prime section, or A again section, heartbreaking emotionally. And that's purely emotionally. When you do this, and then this is the acceptance that you cannot further go in your daydream of reminiscence of what was. Chopin does that in first ballade in G minor to the half diminished. Then the leap to the relative major that is hinted hope. And then the return to the half diminished. You want to escape yourself from your condition through your daydream, and then you're returning down to this romantic era minor mood expressive of the soul's, I don't know, spleen, or blue mood, or whatever you want to call it. And it's paradoxic, because if Chopin uses minor major, Brahms uses minor minor, because this is C sharp minor, and this is F sharp minor, this is D sharp minor, and this is G sharp minor. So he manages to give us such intensively, but very subtly, small step but strong mood change between minor and minor, step, not relative major, and then return to minor, which also by itself is a big emotional roller coaster of Chopin's expression of the melodic line. But of course he harmonizes. So do we first love the music? Yes. Do we understand it because we love it? Yes. Do we read it? Then do we guess it? Do we analyze it? Do we read about it? Do we write about it? Yes, all that. Do we teach it? Therefore we sort of crystallize our inner thoughts by having to explain them by oral, by by making them a statement, and then it becomes somehow more stiff, because all of a sudden it's not a passing thought, it becomes a statement that you have to then agree or disagree with, or prove or disprove. And then as a teacher you could become pedantic at the worst case scenario, where then you involve yourself into saying this is because of that and that's the way because of this, and then everything becomes because of something. Tradition, score reading, instrumental facts. Well, at the beginning and at the end of this cycle of search, understand, study, perform, basically digest the intents, the emotional moods and the intellectual intents that we read into the score, that is relatively not saying anything since there are no lyrics. That's why it's so universal, because it's lyricless, but at the same time it does speak thoughts, and the thoughts are so intense. For me, the thoughts are like spears that go through my body into my soul and questioning me. Who, what, why are you doing that when you play that piece of mine, you performer? Oh, how do you dare teach this like this to the student of my music, you teacher? But most of them are dead, and I try to bring them alive by saying, he wanted this, she expected that, he intended this, but in the way that is designed, organized, displayed, harmonized, melodized, or not, and what, and how, and all this. Of course, it's like art historian looking at the painting and explaining to you things you haven't even the faintest clue when you look at it, because you just look at the beauty of it, but you don't know what you're looking at. You just the perfume of it, but not the essence of it. So the question is, how much of these guesstimations, estimations, understandings, knowledge, pedantic transmission of what we think is the way it is or supposed to be. I purposely, devil's advocate, question myself. What makes me say that to the student who trusts me and who will do whatever they want, and they will, thankfully, not just because what I want them to do. I suggest they choose. Perhaps in time, perhaps not right away. They could reject, they could keep in part. Can they say, I like the tempo, but I don't like his legato, I would like to speak it more by note? Fine. As long as when you play, you have that conviction on the spot that you are telling a certain statement that is perhaps a temporary truth. And you can always argue with your own self later and say, I shouldn't have done that. And when you age, you start understanding through teaching, also through performing, that you can question yourself, like, did I really want to do this? Or should have I done? And then perhaps it's too much, and I should just take out any expression. And then just the rising of the steps be the expression without me either adding the little crescendo or innuendo, or basically adding makeup to a beautiful face. But if I don't do, I feel I'm not involved enough, and if I am learning how to uninvolve while to let the music express itself, then I learn the wisdom about not demonstrating the piece, but just let it be speaking through me without too much adding of my expression, which is a problem, because some audiences, some professionals consider that your interpretation, therefore your translation, or I think it's more like you're putting it alive because originally it's dead, since on the paper I don't hear anything. It's that our intellect needs our emotion and needs our imagination and our culture to understand what is that Brahms wrote around, which symphony, what was Beethoven as an influence to him, in which musical universe of sounds did he bathe? Did he play Hungarian music, gypsy music? Was he interested in, let's say, other idioms than the classical music of his time? How did he evolve? What he do? So in other words, you immerse yourself in his musical world. Takes time. But it's also not that long, because when you're passionate and curious, vivacious, then you absorb all this. You're like a sponge. You need it in a way to nourish your own imagination of how at the end of all this process, I don't know how long it takes, you will end up by playing this, perhaps without expression apparently, but you would have had embedded and then filtered everything of all his musical being in the simplicity of this statement. Simplicity not because it's simple, simplicity is because you choose to let it only speak by itself and stand there and observe it. And Mademoiselle Boulanger used to say, a composer is no more responsible or owning his piece or her piece once it's there for us, shining to in marvel. And we play it, we hear it, we sing it, we perform it, we write it, we rewrite it, we rethink it. But it's there for us. It's an entity that is independent from the composer, and possibly, I would add, she didn't, from his or her intent. Then, of course, the interpretation, I think, as a teacher, but also as a performer, becomes possibly an overstatement of the intent of the written statement. So between over-expressing or putting too much into it more than it is, to the eyes of somebody else, in the eyes of somebody, everybody has an opinion about a beautiful piece, and in a way you can never convince anybody, because it means something different to each of the people, and perhaps it means something similar but in a different way. In other words, there are nuances of ways of expressing it, and you happen to be the one to play and they happen to be the one to listen. So you have to be one of them, but also the one who plays. It's almost like conducting while you play violin in the orchestra. You lead, but you play in it, while you're also implementing the tempo by the upbeat, but then at the same time you're playing with them, because you are them. So you are the listeners and you're the player. And you're my vibrating membrane of the score's notation put alive. I think interpretation is more like that. It's putting alive in vibrating terms of, human psyche, meeting the thought psyche of the composer's intent that is frozen on a notated paper. And in this process of bringing it alive emotionally, intellectually, exaggerations can happen. But that's life. You express, you expose, you under-express, you understate, you overstate, you test, you try. You have convictions, and then you change these convictions through life, because all of a sudden you understood something that somehow life only teaches you through. And as Mademoiselle Boulanger used to say, there are some pieces which are good companions for a life's trip. And of course, if you have the chance to have her very long one, she died in her 90s, and I was at the beginning of mine, I was a child, I was realizing, wow, that's going to be a long path. But of course, as a child, you think of it playfully. In a way, it's reassuring. I'll have a good companion for life, like a pet, and we'll go all around the place and we'll discover the world. A music piece is not a pet. Not a partner either. It's some kind of an entity again that lives with you, lives around you, and is there. And so you teach it and you play it and you try to understand it and you try to play it in a way you understood it. forget all your culture or what's left of everything once everything is forgotten, once everything is digested. It's difficult to be, to have been. You cannot have been before to be, and you have to be to have been. And in between, you realize that yes, Brahms didn't write this when he was a young composer either. It's more like a philosophical statement, I think, and I believe it's reflecting his life of different ways experiencing things, while musically, of course, translated in the emotional language of music without lyrics, just the mood, the thoughts. And the B section is, I think, the evocation of his earlier life when he wrote like a F minor sonata. Here, have that. But then in the last statement, comes with a C sharp minor triad. Interrupted silences, and now return to silence. Before birth, after death. In between life. Perhaps life is the B section. Before birth is the A section. And old age is harmonized explanation after. I know, just saying it, I feel, hearing myself saying it because I thought of it while I played it. It just came to me from the music itself. I didn't think about making up this kind of story, symbolism, facts and all that come to my mind. No, I think that's why we are alive, to share what essential things mean to us. What it means to humanity, hope, love, disappointment, despair, drive, love, hate, another option of love in the other side of the coin. All these things are eternal and constant and repetitive. Of course, all humanity does it over and over and again. And we're searching for some kind of a meaning to the finitude that we don't see by our own level of length compared to the infinity of things. And perhaps these opening octaves are also very representative of some kind of emptiness of the world in terms of the cosmos. And who are we? Very small. But then it means so much to be here and to do this and to share and to be and to connect and to that's the B section. And the mysterious and driven and then disappointing and then almost accepting sad way of the return, and then the A prime finishing with harmonization. Thank you for having shared this with me. I really appreciate that.